Well, we got about 2.5 weeks before the November 8th general election. Good morning. I'm Greg Bishop. It is Springfield's Morning News on 92.7 WMAY. Springfield's news and talk, and a lot to get into this hour. We'll talk about the latest back and forth on the SAFE-T Act. Also, we'll hear some moments from an attorney general debate between Kwame Raoul, the Democratic incumbent, and Tom DeVore, the Republican challenger. They were on WTTW earlier this week, so we'll hear some of that. So that's all on the way here. But let's start by looking at some of the latest polling data that's been released by The Hill in conjunction with Chicago media. And we'll just go right to Twitter, where you've got Tamon Bradley, who recently hosted or moderated the two gubernatorial debates. And he talks about the new poll. And the data coming out shows that, there's a little bit less of a lead for the incumbent, Pritzker, over Bailey, the Republican challenger. 50.4% is what Pritzker's polling at. Darren Bailey's getting 40.8%. Scott Schluter at 2.6%, with 1.7% saying they'll vote for somebody else and 4.4% saying they're undecided. Now, you look at some of the other polling data here. They've got updates for the Senate race, where you've got Kathy Salvi about nearly 10 points behind Tammy Duckworth. Bill Redpath, the Libertarian, only getting 2.1%. So the Democrats favored in that race, according to the latest Emerson College polling with The Hill and WGN as well. But you look at some of the other races, the comptroller race, the Republican trailing the Democrat incumbent by about 12 points or so. You've got the Democrats' treasurer, Michael Frerichs, leading by just shy over around 10 points over Tom Demmer, the Libertarian, coming in about 3.7 in that race. And then the Attorney General race, which is actually pretty close there. 46.8% for Kwame Raoul and 39.1% for Thomas DeVore, with the Libertarian Daniel Robin getting about 3.5%. 8.9% in that race are undecided, and that, I think, is going to be rather fascinating. Alexi Giannoulias for the state's Secretary of State, he's leading in the polls by shy of 10 points, but Dan Brady bringing in 38.7 to Alexi Giannoulias' 48.2%. So that's the Secretary of State race there. But then you look at the regional aspects of the polling, and the polling, again, from The Hill and Emerson College, showing that Chicago, Pritzker's going to get 66%, according to the polling. In the suburbs, 52% for Pritzker. But outside of Chicago, he only gets about 39.7%, where Bailey gets 52.8%. So you can see kind of the breakdown there. But here's what I think is crucial, is the right track, wrong track polling data. And that shows that 52% of Illinoisans that were polled believe that Illinois is on the wrong track. So that, I think, is an interesting indicator there. While some of the polling indicates that Democrats are leading in these races, you've got the questions of, is the state going on the right track or the wrong track? And in particular, you've got questions about, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? And you look at other factors, the business climate in Illinois, the COVID mitigations that rocked Illinois. I do want to kind of share with you some of the other indications that voters might be thinking about, and not just voters, but taxpayers would be thinking about, and that's taxation and how much you've had to pay more in taxes in the past 4 years or so. So you have a report of Illinois taxpayers paying more during the Pritzker administration, and the Illinois Policy Institute put this together, and ultimately highlighting how Illinoisans are indeed paying more. Justin Carlson, he's with Illinois Policy, and he said that after Pritzker was elected in 2018, took office in 2019, Illinoisans have paid more each year, and here's some of what Carlson had to say people are paying more for all throughout the state of Illinois.
We've found that he's implemented about 24 new taxes and fees that have impacted businesses and individuals over his term in office that have cost more than $5 billion.
So that breaks down to over $2,000 more in taxes per taxpayer. In that analysis, and you got to think about all the money there is that was raised on gas taxes. You've got the doubling of the gas tax, tacking on an increase each year. You've also got the questions over the license plate fees that were increased. You've got new online sales taxes, and a variety of other things. But the governor did, and the Democrats did, give some tax relief with the freezing of the annual gas tax increase, but also with zeroing out the grocery tax from 1% to 0% and those tax rebates of $50 each. That doesn't really amount to overall savings compared to tax increases over the past 4 years. So Governor J.B. Pritzker yesterday was campaigning, and he was in Lake County where media did show up, and they asked in particular a couple of questions. One, polling seems to indicate the race is tightening. And then two, are you seeing Republicans peel away from Donald Trump? And Governor Pritzker was asked those two questions. Here's his response to those particular questions.
Fight every day like we're a point behind. We got to do that, as they say. And I feel pretty good about where we are, and we're going to elect Democrats up and down the ballot. Sir, are they embarrassed? Because Darren Bailey supporting Donald Trump. He's the one who said he wants to roll out the red carpet for Donald Trump in 2024. Is he embarrassed now by his support for Donald Trump? Apparently so. Thank you all very much.
So again, Governor J.B. Pritzker yesterday campaigning, and we'll hear some more from the governor coming up, but then we'll open the door for getting into the recent forum that WTTW hosted for incumbent Attorney General Kwame Raoul and Republican challenger Thomas DeVore. So that's coming up next here with Springfield's Morning News, and you can always chime in live and local. Of course, the phone number is 217-629-7970, 217-629-7970. Would love to hear your thoughts, especially about the polling data that came out, and in particular, the right track, wrong track data. Do you agree with this, that Illinois is on the wrong track? 52% in this Emerson College poll with The Hill indicating that the vast majority of Illinoisans who took part in this poll, 52%, they think we're on the wrong track. So stay tuned. We'll get to more of that coming up with your phone calls at 217-629-7970. It is Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk. Back with Springfield's Morning News, I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY. Springfield's News and Talk. We've been talking about the latest polling data from Emerson College and The Hill, and some of it's indicating that there's still a lead with J.B. Pritzker leading Darren Bailey. But you also have some of the other indications like right track, wrong track, which 52% of Illinois voters that took part in this poll believe Illinois is on the wrong track. And then when you look at the issues, economy is 39.1%, threats to democracy 17.5%, with abortion access at 12.2%, crime comes in at 9%, tied with healthcare at 9%. So that might indicate to you what maybe the veracity of the poll, the legitimacy of the poll, if you believe that crime is of top of mind. And I think a lot of people, crime is top of mind, at least for 9% in this particular poll. But one of the things driving that conversation is the SAFETY Act, which was passed in the final hours of the previous legislature, January of 2021. Some of the various elements have gone into effect. One that goes into effect January 1st is the Pretrial Fairness Act. And those who support it have been out there pushing back against what they call misinformation. Governor J.B. Pritzker being one of those pushing back. He was asked about this during a campaign speech yesterday in Lake County. Here's what the governor had to say in reaction to what needs to happen with the SAFETY Act, because nearly half of the state's attorneys, more than half of the state's attorneys, have sued the governor and the state to block implementation of no cash bail. And that no cash bail provision of the Pretrial Fairness Act is what a lot of people are pushing back against, including some states' attorneys saying, come January 1st, the way they're reading it is they'll have to let go people who are currently in jail waiting trial. for various violent crimes. So here's the governor reacting to some of that.
Well, the disinformation that's been promoted by Republicans, especially by Darren Bailey, it has pervaded messaging across the state. They're trying to tell you that people are going to be violent criminals are going to be let out of jail on January 1. That's not what the act says. And we don't want Republicans who may control a county somewhere and a jail, a sheriff or a judge or a state's attorney to let violent criminals out on January 1 because they misread the Safety Act. So let's amend the act to make it very explicit that violent criminals who are in jail awaiting trial, that January 1 is not some deadline to let people out. Now, you know that one of the purposes of the Safety Act is to keep our neighborhoods safe and make sure that people who are awaiting trial who are nonviolent, who may have committed a low-level offense, aren't just sitting in jail because they don't have a few $100s to get themselves out. The system that Darren Bailey and the Republicans are defending is one in which murderers and rapists and domestic violence abusers are buying their way out of jail. We can't let that happen anymore. That shouldn't be. It's an unfair system when somebody poor sits in jail for a low-level offense, but somebody who committed murder or attempted murder is able to just put some money on the table and they get to walk free. So let's make it explicit. In the veto session, we're going to go in and do our best to fight against the Republicans and their misinformation and make sure that we get done what we need to improve the Safety Act.
Again, Governor J.B. Pritzker just laying out, I think, what you're going to hear a lot of heading up to the election and then even the week after the election when state lawmakers come back to Springfield, and it looks like the Safety Act is going to be top of mind in that particular space. Coming back, we will hear more about the Safety Act from the Attorney General candidates, plus their take on COVID and prosecutorial discretion. So all of that's on the way here with Springfield's Morning News. The latest in Illinois polling and politics, as we've got less than, a week and a half or so of before the polls open and then close. So stay tuned. Much more coming up here. And, of course, always your phone calls at 217-629-7970. And you can email bishoponair@gmail.com. All right, so stay tuned. We'll be back with more here with Springfield's Morning. Welcome back. Springfield's Morning News on this Thursday. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk, where you can call in live and local at 217-629-7970. You can also email bishoponair@gmail.com. And if any time you miss something that's of interest, be sure to check out my social media channels where you can see video interviews and news stories and all of that. Just search Bishop on Air and we can connect that way. I do want to remind you I'm raising money for Real Men Wear Pink. Got my nails painted pink. Raised $1,300 to do that. I am about, $1,500 now? And if I get to 4,000, I'm going to dye my hair pink. Breast Cancer Awareness Month. 1 in 8 people will be diagnosed with breast cancer. It can be devastating, but research is there, treatments are there, and you can live with that diagnosis. Early detection is crucial. So get to WMAY.com/pink and donate today. WMAY being helped out there with Heartland Hearing. Better hearing starts today. Again, WMAY.com/pink. So we heard the governor previously talk about the Safety Act and things that he says need to happen in the veto session, which is coming up the week after the November general election, which is just in a short time now, a little over a week's time, and people will be heading to the polls. But the issue of the Safety Act also came up during the recent forum between incumbent Democratic Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul and the Republican challenger Thomas DeVore. This was on WTTW Public TV up in Chicago, and they discussed the Safety Act extensively. And here's just some of how that went down between the two candidates and the moderator, Amanda Vinicky.
It's not, as long as there's a nexus under single subject, as it's been evaluated historically, allows broad discretion to the legislature. And this is the police certification has to do with criminal justice, as does bail.
Briefly, to be clear, do you stand by the police certification process within the Safety Act? It's just a matter of how it was how it got to that point?
You know, we could have that policy debate about whether it goes too far, et cetera, right? I mean, you can get kind of emotional sides of that. I can tell you that
Does it go too far?
in some aspects, yeah. I mean, the FOP, what they were really frustrated with is, you know, they were getting really close to that agreement, trying to play a part in that conversation, and then the Attorney General cut them off. So I know they were getting really close with the terms on that. I don't think they were quite there, but you know, the way that it was abruptly stopped and then consolidated with the Safety Act is really what frustrated the state FOP.
I want to move on to, but just briefly, is that how it went down?
No. We had, in fact, in my conversations, in my direct conversations with the state FOP, they thanked me for engaging them.
Chris Southwood would probably disagree with him.
And Chris Southwood did disagree with him. Chris Southwood, the president of the Illinois FOP State Lodge, yesterday put out a statement saying that Raul wasn't telling the truth. He says Mr. Raul needs to get his facts straight. Why would we thank him for promising to include us in those fateful discussions only to have him ghost us at the most crucial time in the negotiations and let the bill's supporters completely exclude us from providing any input whatsoever? All you need to do is look at the Safety Act to know that Mr. Raul didn't keep his pledge to us and caved in to the pressure from his own political party. So that's a little bit of the back and forth on the Safety Act. But something else, too, about the overall conversation of crime. The Attorney General candidates also discussed that, and in particular, prosecutorial discretion. Now, this is something that it's an interesting conversation to have. I'm not a lawyer, but discretion is available across the entire board of law enforcement. Cops have discretion as to what they're going to pull you over for. Prosecutors have discretion to charge you with one thing or not charge you with another thing, or come together with a plea agreement, and on from there. Judges have discretion as well. But what about prosecutorial discretion? You have the criticism of Cook County's state's attorney, Kim Foxx, not prosecuting certain crimes. And DeVore says that she is actually doing a blanket of not prosecuting what he said were retail theft of under $1,000. And I don't know the state statutes, and I don't know the particular policy, but DeVore claims that that's a violation and could rise to official misconduct. Here's some of the back and forth, and I think an interesting display of where these attorney general candidates land on the idea of prosecutorial discretion. Here is Attorney Thomas DeVore, the Republican challenger, sounding off on that issue.
If, in fact, we have public officials at any level, including state's attorneys, who are not doing their job and they're actually engaging in conduct which is not within their authority under the law, it could rise to the level of official misconduct. That's the conversation to have.
What do you mean by that?
Well, one of the things that she's done recently is just arbitrarily decided across the board that unless you have committed theft in excess of $1,000, she's not going to charge for felony theft. She doesn't have any authority to do that.
Isn't that prosecutorial discretion?
I would disagree. Prosecutorial discretion is very fact-specific, case-by-case determination. But when you're just across the board creating blanket policies like that violate statute, that goes beyond prosecutorial discretion, in my opinion. And again, I'm merely suggesting that's a conversation that has to be had.
So prosecutorial discretion, DeVore says, isn't something that should be blanketly across the board applied. It needs to be case-by-case specific. And he says that not doing the case-by-case specific and just doing blanket policies could rise to the level of official misconduct. Then he says that, if he was elected attorney general, he would do just that and look at possible official misconduct for prosecutors not doing their jobs. But he also talked about how he would intervene in counties where an attorney general, a state's attorney wasn't, handling crime properly and could have congruent prosecutorial capabilities as the state's attorney general. So it's an interesting conversation that they had. Here's incumbent Democrat Kwame Raoul talking about prosecutorial discretion.
No, I don't agree on a blanket exercise of discretion, but I do believe it's within her prosecutorial discretion. And with the notion of suggesting that you're going to prosecute a prosecutor for the exercise of their discretion, I think that's outrageous.
So we're hearing some of the moments from a WTTW debate between, well, it wasn't a debate, it was just a forum moderated by Amanda Vinicky from Chicago Tonight. And hearing from Kwame Raoul, the incumbent Democrat, and Thomas DeVore, the Republican challenger. And they talked about the Safety Act. They talked about how to address gun violence. But they also talked about the thing that really acquainted the two individuals, more than 2 years ago now. Because Thomas DeVore, he filed multiple lawsuits against Governor J.B. Pritzker over the COVID-19 mandates. Something that Kwame Raoul defended against. And you've got this back and forth about whether or not it was a fair question to ask. Is the governor exceeding his executive authority? And at a previous forum, Kwame Raoul said, indeed, it is a fair question. Though he disagreed and he defended the governor and says that he did all of this to keep people safe. DeVore says if it's a fair question, that should have guided the Attorney General's actions as to what to do next.
You know, the Attorney General recently has admitted on 2 occasions that it was a fair question as to whether or not the governor had the authority for the last 2.5 years to issue numerous of these mandates.
You're talking about the executive orders regarding to COVID-19.
Yeah, just whether he had the authority. Fair question. Attorney General and I agree. To that extent, if it's a fair question of whether or not the governor is exercising executive power against 12.5 million people in the state, the Attorney General should always take the side of the people on a fair question and not take the side of the governor against the people. That's where Mr. Raoul and I fundamentally disagree, is that I would have taken the people's side, arguing that it was a fair question, that the governor doesn't have the power, and then the governor could have defended himself with his resources through the executive office. We left our people hanging out to dry for 2.5 years on that fair question.
So again, talking about the COVID-19 orders and where the candidates land on that and what they would have done. And again, Kwame Raoul defended the governor. He said that they were saving lives. He was defending the executive authority because we had a health emergency going on. We'll get to some of what DeVore had to say on that, but in particular, DeVore said he just would have handled the whole situation differently if indeed he was Illinois' Attorney General.
I have to say this, with all due respect to the Attorney General, his role as the chief legal officer is not about measuring the medical data. The Attorney General's role is to measure the constitutionality and the law that's being wielded by the executive.
So what should have happened during COVID?
And courts have spoken over and over because of his excessive filing of cases.
And I ultimately ended up, the only case that the governor ever won is that he could issue serial proclamations. It wasn't even a case I was in. Serial proclamations, now 34 months in. The governor has never won a case to the extent of him wielding this power.
So Attorney Thomas DeVore laying out at least his fundamental philosophy of what the Attorney General should be doing, especially in the case of executive authority going on now more than 2.5 years. So some more on this, because again, this is I think what propelled DeVore into the spotlight, was his challenges of the governor's COVID-19 executive orders. And here's just another clip of the two discussing this during the WTTW forum.
Scenario.
Keeping the people safe from executive abuse is what the Attorney General should do. It was real simple. When the governor started wielding that executive power, the Attorney General, knowing that it was a fair question, should have demanded that the legislature step in and pass policy and legislation identical to what the governor did. That would have been fine. But we allowed a governor to wield unprecedented power for 3 years. The Attorney General could have stepped up and said, no, I'm going to bring an action testing this, and the legislature could have fixed it.
He just acknowledged that the court said that the governor had the authority to do so. He just said it a few seconds ago.
He had the authority to issue a disaster proclamation.
And that's what was being litigated.
That doesn't know what was being litigated. Sorry, you weren't there, sir. I was there for thousands of hours. What was there is, regardless of a disaster proclamation, could the governor wield executive power, closing businesses and putting masks on kids and all of those things? The governor never won any of those cases.
So interesting debate, again, from a forum that was hosted by WTTW for the Attorney General candidates. And you can see the whole thing was about 20 minutes long, really. with some questions ranging from crime to COVID. But they're not the only two on the ballot. You've got Libertarian Attorney General candidate Dan Robin on the ballot as well. You've got some really really interesting decisions to make in just a handful of days here in Illinois.